My name is Gabriel, and I'd like to touch base on some interesting topics within psychology. So, I'd like to start talking about monism and free will. So, before diving into free will and monism, I'd like to start by talking about the relationship between our minds and the brain. As we know, the mind is associated with the brain. The two terms are often used interchangeably. So the brain is considered to be a physical thing and the mind is considered to be mental. So the brain is composed of, nerve cells and they can be touched, whereas the mind cannot be touched. So let us explore the major differences between brain and mind in detail. So in this picture, we can see both differences. So the brain, it is a physical thing, and the mind, it is a mental thing. The brain is made up of blood vessels and nerve cells, while the mind is not made up of any cells and it's hypothetical. The brain has a definite shape and structure, and the mind does not. The brain also coordinates movements, feelings, and the different functions of the body, while the mind refers to a person's conscious and understanding the thought process. The brain, you can actually touch the brain, but you cannot touch the mind. So having this basic understanding of both differences, there are two perspectives that we've covered in class, which is monism and dualism. So I'd like to explain the difference between both and how monism can be related to free will. So to begin with, the main difference between monism and dualism is that monism is the ultimate belief that the mind and body are the same elements and are generated from a supreme soul. On the other hand, dualism believes that the mind and the brain work separate from each other, and it is said that an individual is not generated from a supreme soul, but the existence of an individual depends upon the supreme soul itself. So, after understanding both of these, we can see how there is conflict between both in relation to free will. According to monism, the mind and the body are the same and can't be separate entities, as we saw in class, while dualism believes they are separate entities which are believed by most religions. As an example, I am a Christian and I believe that my mind and soul is separate from my body. I read a study in regards to dualism and free will, and I don't believe that you can hold a monism view while believing in free will at the same time. So, in order to understand my perspective, let's take a look at free will. So, free will is the idea that we are able to have some choice in how we act and assumes that we are free to choose our behavior. In other words, we are self determined. So, for example, people can make a free choice as to whether to commit a crime or not, unless they're a child, or they're insane. So, this does not mean that behavior is random, though we are free from the causal influences of past events. So, according to free will, a person is responsible for their own actions. So, most people believe in free will. Whether this belief is warranted or not, free will beliefs are foundational for many legal systems, and reducing free will beliefs has effects on behavior from the motor to the social level. This raises the important question as to which specific free will belief people hold. So, from the research, I found a case where there was shown a direct comparison that suggests that dualism was more predictive of free will beliefs than other intuitions. Thus, believing in free will goes hand in hand with a belief in a non physical mind. Highlighting the importance of dualism for free will beliefs impacts academic debates on free will, which currently largely focus on its relation to determinism. So on this graph over here, we can see on the left the correlations between general free will beliefs and determinism are depicted. So for the United States, and using 900 people as reference, also in Singapore, on the right, the relation between general free will beliefs and dualism is depicted. Each dot represents a single subject. This shows that people see dualism as a necessary condition for free will. Although dualistic beliefs are known to be pervasive, I was surprised by the degree to which both the general public in the US as well as Singapore believed in mind body dualism. So, the vast majority, more than 3 out of 4 participants, believe that the mind or soul is a non physical entity, or at least that the mind cannot be reduced to the brain. A similar proportion of subjects views any material soul as a necessary condition for free will. Some previous work already demonstrated a high prevalence of dualism beliefs in a US sample, yet also demonstrated a considerable inter-individual difference in dualism beliefs. I can attest to this myself since I believe in both dualism and free will. Since a child, I truly believed in God because it was instilled in me, but in my own way, and I always believed that my body was a tool for my mind, which was separate. That once I die, if I did good in this earth, I would go to heaven. In regards to free will, I also believe that God gives you that opportunity to do what you can with what you have. Hence, I believe in free will, and that everything you do is a decision that you made and it is never predetermined. And having a monistic view, as shown by the study, does not correlate to free will beliefs, as this study was done to 900 participants from each country. So, moving forward, I'd like to talk about human behavior and how it affects, how we perceive other humans and other groups. So, to begin with, what exactly is behavior? So, in scientific research, human behavior is a complex interplay of three components: actions, cognition, and emotions. It sounds complicated, right? So, let's address them one by one. So, actions are behavior. An action denotes everything that can be observed, either with bare eyes or measured by psychological sensors. Think of an action as an initiation or transition from one state to another. At a movie set, the director shouts action for the next scene to be filmed. Behavioral actions can take place on various timescales, ranging from muscular action to sweat glands activity, food consumption, or sleep. We also have cognitions, which are behavior. Cognitions describe thoughts and mental images you carry with you, and they can be both verbal and nonverbal. Let's say, I have to remember to buy groceries, or I'd be curious to know what she thinks of me. Those can be considered verbal cognitions. In contrast, imagining how your house will look like after remodeling could be considered a nonverbal cognition. So, cognitions comprise skills and knowledge, knowing how to use tools in a meaningful manner without hurting yourself, like sing karaoke songs or being able to memorize the color of Marty McFly's jacket, in Back to the Future movie, for example. Emotions are behavior too. So, commonly, an emotion is any relatively brief conscious experience characterized by intense mental activity, and a feeling that is not characterized as resulting from either reasoning or knowledge. This usually exists on a scale from positive, which is pleasurable, to negative, which is unpleasant. Other aspects of psychology that are indicative of emotional processing, such as increased heart rate or respiration rate caused by increased arousal, or usually hidden to the eye, similar to cognitions. Emotions cannot be observed directly. They can only be inferred indirectly by tracking facial electromagnetic activity with the EMG, for example, or monitoring arousal using ECG, respiration sensors, or self-reported measures, for example. In the end, everything is connected, right? Actions, cognitions, and emotions do not run independently of each other. Their proper interaction enables you to perceive the world around you. So listen to your inner wishes and respond appropriately to people in your surroundings. However, it is hard to tell what exactly is cause and effect. So turning your head, that's an action, and seeing a similar face might cause a sudden burst of joy, which is an emotion, accompanied by an internal realization, which is cognition. So in this first example, we have an action, which is, it comes from emotion, joy, and then cognition. He says, hey, there's Peter, with a joyful reaction. In other cases, the sequence of cause and effect might be reversed because you're sad, which is an emotion, and ruminating on relationship issues, which is cognition. So you decide to go for a walk to clear your head. In the end, that's the action. So in this example, the emotion is sadness, the cognition is, I should go for a walk, and that ends up being, the action you actually do. So we can argue that the way we interpret human behavior can have an impact on society because we often have different personalities and thus we have different perspectives. Some people are misunderstood, and for that reason, it can affect negatively society. I like to dive into some types of behaviors with examples. First, we have social attention, right? So we've all heard the saying, "It's just attention-seeking behavior." It isn't bad to want attention from others. However, for a variety of reasons, some people may learn that behaving in a particular way is a reliable way of attracting any kind of attention. For example, This example we have right here, Sarah loves adult interaction, right? But at school, Sarah must share the teacher or assistant's time with the rest of the class. So Sarah is sitting unattended. So Sarah wets herself. The teacher or assistant takes Sarah out of the classroom to help her clean up and change into dry clothes. So Sarah gets time with an adult. She learns that when she wants attention from an adult at school, that she wets herself and then she gets the attention. So the function of Sarah's behavior is that it gets her attention. Number two, we have tangibles. So sometimes the desire for certain things, food, drinks, objects, activities, provides the motivation for the behavior. Again, it isn't bad to want these things. If you are hungry, it makes sense to try to get something to eat. If you see something in the shop that you like, it makes sense to try to buy it. However, it becomes a problem when the person learns to act inappropriately to get these things. For example, Tom is thirsty, right? So he finds a cup and he throws it at someone. So Tom gets given a drink. Now Tom has learned that when he wants a drink, he throws a cup and he gets a drink. So the function of Tom's behavior is that it gets him something tangible, particularly an item that he wants. Number three, we have escape. So, whilst many people like attention, some would prefer to be left alone at times. Some people will behave in a way that helps them avoid escape situations or activities that they don't like or they don't find rewarding. So, for example, Holly doesn't enjoy group like activities, so Holly hits the person in the group sitting nearest to her. So the teacher takes Holly to sit out in the quiet corridor. Now, Holly learns that when she wants to be taken out of a group activity, she hits someone and gets removed from the class. So, the function of Holly's behavior is that it helps her escape. Number four, we have sensory. So, sometimes behavior is internally rewarding or self reinforcing. What is happening around the person externally is not as important as what is happening inside the person. For example, Farhan has been on his own in the sitting room for 20 minutes and he's unable to occupy himself. So Farhan rocks back and forth and hums loudly. Now Farhan likes the feeling he gets from this. He can do this for a long time. So Farhan learns that when he has nothing to do, he can stimulate himself by rocking and humming. So the function of his behavior is sensory. So the behavior display may appear pointless, annoying, or even distressing to the observer. However, for the person themselves, the behavior may serve the function of helping them cope with unpleasant negative feelings such as boredom or even anxiety. Although a challenging behavior may appear negative to us, the behavior may serve as a positive coping strategy for the individual. If you can't cope with someone sitting too close, just bite them and they'll move away. Moving forward, I like to talk about mixed signals, why people misunderstand each other. So after analyzing behavior, I'd like to dive into this, and this is by introducing a reading from Haiti Grant Halverson, which is titled "No One Understands You and What to Do About It." So in this book, Haiti Grant Halverson tells readers a story about her friend Tim. When Tim started a new job as a manager, one of his top priorities was communicating to his team that he valued each member's input. So at a team meeting, as each member spoke up about whatever project they were working on, Tim made sure that he put on his active listening face to signal that he cared about what each person was saying. So after meeting a few times, Tim got a very different message from the one that he intended to send. So after a few weeks of meetings, one team member finally summoned the courage to ask him the question that had been on everyone's mind. The question was, Tim, are you angry with us right now? When Tim explained that he wasn't at all angry, that he was just putting on his active listening face, his colleague gently explained that his active listening face looked a lot like his angry face. So to Halverson, a social psychologist at Columbia Business School, who has extensively researched how people perceive one another, Tim's story basically captures one of the primary problems of being a human being, which is that you might not come across the certain way to others. People often perceive you and altogether in a different way. So one person may think, for example, that by offering help to a colleague, that she's coming across as generous, but her colleague may interpret her offer, as a lack of faith maybe in his abilities, just as He misunderstands her, she misunderstands him. In this example, she offered him help because she thought that he was overworked and stressed, while he has, after all, been showing up early to work and going, home late every day. But that's not why he is keeping these strange hours and overworking. He just works best when the office is less crowded. So, from this example, we can understand how people can misinterpret behavior since we're very different from each other. We may believe that certain behavior will lead to a certain outcome, but maybe somebody else has a totally different perspective. For this reason, I believe that it is very important to be open minded with each other and understanding of the fact that we are unique to each other, which means that we should be more understanding and less judgmental. This is a clear case on how behavior can affect the way we interact with people, thus make an effect on society itself. So, the last topic that I would like to introduce from a perceptual perspective that brings me to the question, do humans experience the world objectively? And if not, can they actually do it? So, the matter of the fact is that humans can't view the external world objectively, according to researchers, and this is because through a series of experiments and using sophisticated computer graphics, and laser cut coins, the researchers found that it's almost impossible for people to separate an object's true identity from their own perspective on it. So, in this case, people looked at round objects that were tilted away from them. Even when people were certain that the objects were round, they couldn't help but see them in a distorted way, as ovals or ellipses. As Chas Firestone said, this question about the influence of one's own perspective on perception is one that philosophers have been discussing for centuries. So, when humans see things, the brain identifies them by combining our raw visual information with ingrained assumptions and knowledge about the world. For example, if you take a circular coin and tilt it away from you, light from the coin hits your eyes in the shape of an oval or ellipse, but your brain then goes beyond that information and makes you see a circle in the real world. So, philosophers, notably including John Locke and David Hume, have long wondered if it's possible to separate the way the object really is. So, a circle from how it lands on our eyes, which is an ellipse. In other words, whether a pure objective vision is even possible. So, to get at the question, the team actually designed a philosophy experiment for the lab. So, over the course of 9 experiments, subjects were shown pairs of three-dimensional coins. One was a true oval, the other was a circle, and subjects had to pick the true oval. So, seems easy, right? Yet, when presented with tilted circular coins, subjects were flummoxed and the response time slowed significantly. This persisted whether the coins were still or moving, with different shapes, and whether the coins were shown on a computer, screen, or display, right in front of the subjects. You know, Jorge Morales concluded that objects are stamped with our perspective, and he even went to say, our subjective approach to the world stays with us. Even when we try to perceive the world the way it really is, we can't completely discard our perspective. Another example that proves this point was an experiment done where 23 volunteers had to kick an American football through the field goal from the 10-yard line. After warm up, participants were asked to judge the height and width of the goal by adjusting a handheld, scaled down model of the goal made out of PVC pipes. Then each of them performed 10 kicks. Immediately after the final kick, participants repeated the perceptual measurement. The result was striking. So, before kicking, both groups had the same perception of the size of the goal. Incidentally, an inaccurate one. Everybody underestimated its actual width to height ratio. But after 10 kicks, the poor performers, those who scored 2 or fewer successful kicks, saw the goal as about 10% narrower than they had before. Whereas the good kickers, those who scored 3 or more, perceived the goal to be about 10% wider. How well you have performed over the past few minutes influences the way you see the world, not just metaphorically, but on a physiological level. It changes your actual perception. So, after more data mining, 2 psychologists discovered that the people who missed the goal did it because they tended to kick the ball too short and perceived the crossbar as being higher than their more successful peers. Whereas those who missed because they kicked wide judged the upright field post to be narrower. From both research and experiments, we can conclude that humans are unable to view the external world objectively. Our conscious perception of the world, though relatively stable, is not static. we're incapable of being fully objective, even in our most mundane observations and impressions. So, being human means seeing the world through your own constantly shifting lens. In reality, we can't completely discard our own perspective of the world, and that is the beauty of psychology. And this can affect other aspects of psychology due to the simple fact that different people can perceive the world through a different lens, per se. Thank you very much for your attention.